A First Alert 6 investigation leads to the release of a startling report on the defunct Creighton Federal Credit Union. Last night, our Mike McKnight uncovered more than $13 million unaccounted for when the small credit union merged with a larger one.
Tonight, he obtained an inspector general's report sent to Congressman Mike Flood, who demanded answers and got them.
As a member for 15 years, Ron Hugg trusted Creighton Federal Credit Union with his money.
And I think I knew everybody in there in the credit union on a first-name basis,
including the chief financial officer, who allegedly took a secret to the grave last April. The National Credit Union Administration Inspector General alleges the CFO hid $12 million in losses over 26 years.
This is quite shocking, very surprised. Because I always, in my dealings with them, found them to be, extremely conservative.
As First Alert first revealed, Creighton Federal Credit Union's final financial reports showed a nearly 20% loss of total worth in 3 months.
And there's an accounting line, $12.5 million went lost miscellaneous.
But audits after the CFO's death revealed the financial losses hidden for a quarter century.
Oh, it blows the lid off of it. Thank you.
And a former National Credit Union Administration official wonders how.
And that somebody wasn't aware enough and not doing even the rudimentary due diligence things that would have discovered this kind of default.
The report says the CFO exploited the credit union's weak accounting system to backpost, forward post, and delete transactions when generating annual financial statements.
The report indicates that much of the fraudulent bookkeeping revolved around Creighton Federal Credit Union's 150 ATMs and understating their expenses.
Fraud auditors didn't find any cash removed from Creighton Federal Credit Union by the CFO. NCUA officials say a review going back 20 years found no improper transfer of credit union funds to the CFO or his family. The regulators speculate the motive of the accounting fraud was to make Creighton Federal Credit Union appear to be thriving in the eyes of its board and membership, when in fact it was failing.
I think it clearly says that there was no personal gain, there was no personal intent. I just think it was a poor decision in accounting practices.
None of the Creighton Federal Credit Union members like Hugg lost money, as their accounts are federally insured and transferred to Cobalt Credit Union during a merger. But the reputation of integrity that Creighton Federal Credit Union boasted for 70 years has been lost. In Omaha, Mike McKnight, First Alert 6.
The Inspector General's report found nobody in the credit union's leadership knew of the alleged fraud by the CFO until after his death.
Mike talked to the CEO and he declined to comment on the findings. The Inspector General will conduct a review of the oversight process. Now, we also want to note Creighton Federal Credit Union was not affiliated in any way with Creighton University.